briefly, our overview of our presentation today. First, we're going to introduce the area of study. Then we're going to introduce our project. We're going to go over our findings, and then we're going to go into our recommendations and deliverables.
So first, we want to give you guys a little bit of context for our project. As I'm sure you're all aware, Namibia gained its independence from South Africa in 1990, but South Africa brought in policies of apartheid to Namibia. So what that meant, one big thing was the physical separation of blacks and whites. So blacks moved to Karatura, which is an informal settlement on the outskirts of Windhoek, while the whites got to stay in the main city area of Windhoek. So this physical separation is still present in today's Namibia, but now it's a lot less because of race. It's much more because of the big gap between the rich and poor, which explains these two pictures here. So on the top you have Karatura, and on the bottom you have just a nice house in Windhoek. So another area where apartheid is still having effects is in education. So during apartheid, education in Karatura received a lot fewer resources than that in Windhoek. That kind of carries over in today and still has long-term effects on poor education. So the challenges Karatura faces in education today, high dropout rates. A lot of students in Karatura end up on the streets or just engaging in destructive behaviors. Another one is insufficient resources. It's difficult to supplement your basic education without basic supplies. Another one is the lack of teacher support. In Namibia, the student-teacher ratio is about 26:1, and it's half of that in the state of Massachusetts where we're from. In addition, a lot of teachers end up teaching just because there's nowhere else for them to go in Namibia, so they just don't have the right motivation to teach their students. So all this kind of cycles back into student underperformance. It's very difficult for students to get the most out of their education with all these struggles.
Which is where our sponsor, Physically Active Youth, was developed. We commonly refer to it as PEG. It's an after-school program run by 6 full-time staff. Most of them are in the photo on the top. And their mission is to nurture self-confidence, critical thinking, and active citizenship in young Namibians coming from disadvantaged backgrounds to create a more equal and knowledgeable Namibia future. And they do this for over 80 learners currently grades 1 through 12. They first offer a meal in the bottom. You can see a photo. Every day they offer lunch. They then have 2 hours where an hour is dedicated to help with homework and then an education lesson. And then the last hour is sports, which can be swimming, cycling, or soccer, or chess. In the bottom you can see one of us playing soccer with the kids as well. So they've asked us to step in and help develop a science curriculum specifically for the grades 5 through 7 classroom, which is where our research question has come in. What makes up a successfully delivered and engaging lesson plan for learners grades 5 through 7? We've broken up this research question into a 3-part methodology. The first part was done before coming here. We call it the creativity stage, where we want to establish the standards for an engaging lesson plan. The second step, it was done here in Namibia, where we create, design, implement, and redesign our lessons in the PEG classroom for grades 5 through 7. And our third deliverable is handing over all of our lessons and materials so they can continue teaching science lessons after we left. Alright, now talk about objective 1.
So in order to assume the role of teachers when we got here in Namibia to work with PEG, we realized that we needed to do some preparation to catch us up to speed on how to teach. We used 3 methods to do this in the term of preparation before we arrived. We used a teacher questionnaire, lesson data collection, and we also practiced the lesson in a listed open classroom. The purpose of the teacher questionnaire was to gain insight from experienced teachers on how to create and facilitate lessons as well as conducting the classroom. We used a convenient sample of teachers in Massachusetts, and you can see a snapshot of some of the questions we asked them on the left. On the right is a word cloud that represents some of the key takeaways from their responses, which include adding a lot of movement in the lessons, aligning the lesson plans with standards from the syllabus, creating a community through supporting the students and through connecting with them, as well as being excited about what you're teaching. Then we created a model lesson plan and we sent it to a series of teachers within the same convenient sample that we used for the questionnaire. We sent this model lesson plan to one teacher at a time and asked them to make revisions on the lesson. Once we received those revisions back, we made the edits and sent it to the next teacher. We continued this process until we no longer received new revisions on the lesson. This graphic shows a summary of the process of lesson data collection. So in rounds 1, 2, and 3, we received substantial feedback from the respondents on how to improve the lesson. And some of the key takeaways from their comments were start with probing questions, vary levels of difficulty, and keep the activities simple. Then, in rounds 4, 5, and 6, the comments really narrowed and focused on different ways to present the learning objectives to the class. So these were more nitpicky comments. And finally, we sent it to the 7th teacher, who responded, "The lesson looks good, I have no feedback." So this was the point at which we reached data saturation. Thirdly, we took this model lesson and we practiced it in the 5th grade classroom in a Worcester Public School. Here is a picture of the team teaching the class a song about the body parts of an insect. And from this practice lesson, we learned that when we're teaching a song, we need to give the students the lyrics to have in front of them so that they can connect the words that they're saying to the lyrics on the page. We also learned that we work best as co-facilitators when we just jump in and build off of each other's ideas. And finally, we learned that in order to conduct the class, we would need a method to recenter the class's focus on us and have them be quiet. The students of the class wrote us letters after the practice lesson, and one of them said, "I love the song, that was my favorite. I also liked the butterfly game. Best of luck in Africa." In addition, the main teacher of the classroom, Mrs. Gibbs, wrote us a note with some advice. She said, "Take the time to reflect daily on your most challenging moments, for those are the moments you will learn the most about yourself and our world." Our team took this advice and we applied it in Objective 2, where we would reflect daily as a team after we teach a lesson. And Sammy will now go more to Objective 2.
So Objective 2 was lesson creation and implementation at Physically Active Youth, and we did this through the lesson iteration cycle, which you can see in the graphic here. And what we would do is we create lessons, and then each week at the end of the week we would reflect upon those lessons, and then the next week we would revise our lessons based on our reflections from the week prior. So week 1, we taught the scientific method, and from the pre-assessment of the students, we found that no students knew about the scientific method yet. So we took this opportunity to teach them about the apparatus of the science equipment. We taught them graduated cylinders, beakers, all those things, and we did a really fun experiment called elephant toothpaste. And you can see the pictures here of the students doing elephant toothpaste, and it's an experiment with like a big foamy explosion. And we did this to kind of get them excited for us being there, get them excited for science, and things like that. And we used this experiment also to give them practicals, because the students don't necessarily get practicals in their own public schools. So you can see here 2 images from the end of the week. We did a workshop. Additionally, to get the students excited about science, we taught them about different jobs that you can get in the science field, and we taught them about chemists, geographers, and engineers. At the end of week 1, when we reflected, we understood that we had to adjust our note-taking strategies. So we created more guided note sheets in week 2, which you can see here. And we taught matter, and the guided note sheets are more of a note sheet where you can insert just one word or one phrase rather than have the students write out the whole definition in their notebook. And this was super helpful to us because it allowed the students to look back at their note sheets and have a solid note of what we taught them. In addition to that, we had them do a review sheet at the end of each week, which helped them solidify the concepts that we taught them throughout the week and reinforce them, which helped a lot. And at the end of week 2, we noticed that the students were very competitive in the way they did group work and competitive in the way, like, fun competitive. So we utilized that in week 3, and we had them write letters to students in the United States in a 5th grade classroom. And this also brings in the cultural exposure aspect of that PEG strives to do, because we allowed them to ask questions about any questions they had about America, about what the students like this, and they each got a fun pen pal. And we told them that the best letter of each grade got a prize, and immediately they like all copied it down and like wrote really curiously, and the letters came out really cool. And these are the 3 winners of the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, and their names are Pono, Annalie, and Gerard. And week 3 is also the week when we started filming our lessons. So we would film the lesson of the day and then send it out to a panel of educators who would give us feedback on our facilitation. And we found that in week 3, their feedback was that we should slow down when we ask questions and allow the students more time to think about their answers before and not just call on the first student that raises their hand, because it's typically the same group of students. And we applied that in week 4, along with our own personal reflection, which was that we needed to break up our note taking. So in week 4, we did a fun activity that was also competitive where they had to grab food using different types of objects to mimic bird beaks, and it was all about adaptations. And then we also had them do a drama of a life cycle of the animal that they chose. And we found that these activities where they stood up and got out of the note-taking mindset were really beneficial because they remembered them, they remembered the content that we were teaching them. And at the end of week 4, we also allowed them to do their absolute favorite thing, which is drawing. And they got to create their own food chains like with paper chains together with drawings of producers, consumers, all that type of things. And they really, really enjoyed that, so that was fun to see. And then at the end of week 4, we wanted to reflect upon making our lessons more relatable to the students. So we wanted to focus on creating models and creating things that they could physically see what we were teaching them. So on the right, you can see we created lungs in a bottle where we used balloons to create the lungs and then the diaphragm. And when you pull down the diaphragm on the bottle, it blows up the lungs. So rather than just telling the students what the diaphragm and what the lungs do, it was really cool to have them see it physically, and then they all remembered making it and seeing it. And in addition to that, in week 5, we focused really heavily on varying the level of difficulty of the worksheets. So you can see on the left, they did a skeleton measurement game where they measured every bone in their body. And then we had the 5th graders just do that, and the 6th and 7th graders also had to convert their measurements from centimeters to meters. And we found that it was like perfect timing, they all finished at the same time, which was nice and a recommendation that we had for the future.
So now we'll look at our objective 3, where we evaluate our success and had deliverables and recommendations. So first, we had a post-hoc assessment. We did stakeholder feedback, which is in the form of surveys for our students as well as interviews, and then final recommendations and deliverables. So first, our post-hoc assessment. The main purpose of this was to see the lesson retention from our students to see what they took out of our lesson, basically. The results, they took an assessment of about 18 questions asking about specific things that they learned. We graded it. We gave them green if they remembered something, they had keywords involved, and they gave the right answer. We gave them white if they said, I don't know, or I don't remember. And then we gave them a red if they gave it a guess, but they were wrong. So the main takeaway was that all the students really got a lot out of our lessons. There was a lot of green, which was especially cool. We were very proud because a lot of 5th graders had never really been exposed to science lessons before, or especially hands-on science, so they got a lot out of that. And the reason for the 6th and 7th graders getting more green, more right answers, is because they have had a lot more exposure to it. So these lessons act more as reinforcement for what they've learned in the past. So next, the post-assessment was to gauge the lesson retention, and the student satisfaction survey was more to gauge happiness and kind of engagement of the lessons. So what we did, we gave them a survey for 16 activities. They filled it out between a 0 and 5 scale. 0 was that they don't remember the activity at all. 1 was that they didn't like the activity and don't want to do it again. And 5 was that they really enjoyed it and would love to do it again. So the results from this was 9 of the 16 activities landed in the 90% range of satisfaction and up. 5 of the 16 activities landed in the 80% range, and then 2 of them landed in the 70% range. So the main takeaway here is that pretty much all the activities our students really enjoyed and would love to do them again.
So the student activity surveys were one form of stakeholder feedback, and then we gained more stakeholder feedback through interviews with our sponsors, specifically Ms. Ursula and Ms. Tuba, who are present in the audience tonight. Thank you for coming. They also both serve as directors at PEG. So one thing we learned from these interviews was that an area for us to improve on, or for groups to improve on in the future, is working on the noise of the classroom. So in both of their interviews, they mentioned how at some points the noise of the classroom got a little bit loud and distracting for the staff members that work right outside the classroom. But then they turned around and looked into the class and recognized that the noise was generated by creativity, excitement, and productivity rather than chaos. So now there's not the need to ever step in and quiet the class. But that is one area that we could probably work on, and groups can work on in the future. But through these interviews, we also discovered the highlights of the program for our sponsor, which were all the hands-on practicals and activities that we did, because these really, the kids it's not a part of the curriculum in school. So it's really nice for them to be able to learn in a different way, rather than just taking notes, but discovering, using their hands, and finding out for themselves. In addition, another highlight was how prepared our team was when we came in to teach activities every day, and also how we sat down with the students, ate lunch with them, and really connected with them on a personal level. In Miss Ursula's interview, she was talking about our facilitation, and she said, your young spirit helps. Taking breaks with the students is a good tactic, and she mentioned that it might be one thing that she incorporates when she returns to be the head of our classroom. Ms. Tuba talked about our program on the whole and said the fact that it's interactive for students to try themselves means they can do it themselves and they can do it in their schools. And this leads into probably one of the coolest parts of the program for us, when two of our 7th grade students, Erica and Yard, had a project in school, and they came to us and asked if they could borrow some of the tools and materials to recreate the Alfred Toothpaste experiment for that project. So Sandy wrote up the procedure and lent them the materials, and the next day they came back beaming because the experiment went so well and they were able to show all their peers at school. Their teachers wanted to see the experiment because, like we said, experiments aren't done in their schools on a daily basis. So then they came back, they were really excited. We had them recreate the experiment and demo it for all the other students at PEG. And this was it was one of the cooler moments for us because it showed how they gained the confidence to take the materials that we taught them about, like the graduate cylinder, the beakers, the hydrogen peroxide, and they had the confidence to recreate that experiment and show their peers.
Our second form of deliverables is the recommendations. We broke up into 3 separate sections. The first one is for recommendation for physically active youth. Then there's recommendation for other volunteers at PEG, and finally, recommendation for future WPI students who will volunteer at PEG. So the main takeaways for PEG for recommendations is 1, communication. One thing we recommend is maybe creating a WhatsApp group chat with all staff and current volunteers and interns. So that way, if something changes the day of or the day before, the head person can just send out the message so everyone's informed of what's going on today, what the schedule is. A great time where this would have been helpful is one day the water was turned off and we didn't know if we were sending our students home or not because there were people talking that the younger students were being sent home. So if we had the WhatsApp, someone could have just sent a message, 7th grade to run through our home, everyone else continued teaching, and we could have continued on the day very smoothly. Another recommendation is creating a volunteer's expectations notebook or journal of some sort with detailed outlines of the day-to-day activities and how PEG functions. So, for example, how the chores are run and what's expected of chores. It took us a couple weeks to finally understand and implement it correctly. However, if we had it in detail beforehand, we could have started with the chores done correctly the first day. And finally, we want to recommend keeping up the positivity from our very first Skype meeting back in January. The first lines were, "Stop being so serious, smile." And so we took from that, just keep the upbeat and it's okay, be flexible and roll with it. So keep up the positivity for sure. The key takeaways and recommendations for other volunteers at PEG is flexibility. Every day, volunteers should be expected to be flexible, whether that means lending a hand cooking lunch, picking up another lesson to teach, helping with chores, whatever it is, just remain flexible and go with the flow. Plans change because they probably will. If they're going to be teaching our specific science lessons, they need to be 2 things. One, they need to make sure they read the lessons all the way through, including the bottom, which is made up of a feedback section. That feedback section was written after each lesson was taught to show the pros and cons of what went well and what didn't, and what should be changed before teaching the lesson again. And finally, with the computer, they should be able to watch the videos of our lessons being taught so you can see exactly how we engage with the students and taught the content. Our third set of recommendations, which are for future WPI students, the big takeaway is energy. They need to come every day full of energy because it radiates down to the learner. So we're excited about teaching science, they will be too. They need to come every day with that. Also, we recommend that they fundraise. We did that as a team before coming, and it helped a lot, especially with holiday school. We weren't aware that we'd be teaching 2 full weeks with longer lessons, so it allowed us to do some really cool demos and activities that we wouldn't have had the budget otherwise. Our students need to keep in mind, fine line between creating really cool hands-on, complex lessons with simple lessons, because you want to make sure that your lessons will be reproduced in the future. So you need to make sure that PEG has some way of getting materials or leave the materials with them. And finally,
Hackathon is educational.
Our physical deliverables that we're leaving at PEG are a school future, and we hope that this will foster a good way of them to get through that. Before we conclude, we'd like to thank our sponsors, our advisors, and all of our peers, and we'd like to extend a really great thank you to our students because they made it such a rewarding experience, and they put a smile on our face every day. And we also would really, 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 really love to see WPI and Pay have a really great relationship in the future because we're really passionate about this project. So, thank you for listening to our presentation. Anyone have any questions? Yeah. Where do we go from here?
Well, yeah, we hope that we think that Pay, the organization, hopes to continue hosting project groups in the future. So we thought about different ideas for ways that they can incorporate project groups into their program, different things that they can continue on. One recommendation is to build on this curriculum and go more into depth on some topics. In our time here, we weren't able to cover everything on the Caribbean syllabus for grades 5 through 7, so they could definitely build more on that and go into depth.
As far as the deliverables, we hope that what we've given can be applied to other volunteers. So when they come in and they need to teach a lesson, they can quickly read through our lesson, see if they have materials for the day, and adjust accordingly to add on and teach right then and there for those students.
I have spoken to the director of the Women's Meeting Business, and we will share